This video is going to address some of the anatomy of typography, and we're going to start with the ear. And the ear can be found on a number of the serif lowercase g's. So if we choose a serif typeface from, say, the old classification such as Garamond or Jensen, we're going to be able to identify the ear. Enlarge that a little bit so you can see it. And the ear is actually the part just peeking off the end of the top here. Again, I'm going to just make a red circle around the anatomy so you can see it, and that part right there is considered the ear. The eye is an easy one to identify and actually exists in all the classification of the typeface because it's a part of the actual E, and it is the space inside that we would sometimes consider a closed counter space, but a lot of people also identify it as the I of the E. So actually it's acceptable that you consider that a counter space as well. And actually an E has an open counter space as well. But you'll find a lot of sources that say that that is considered the I. The finale is actually the end of a variety of letter forms. And I'll go ahead and use the E again, since it's a good representation and working in Garamond, but I'll go ahead and change it to Baskerville, which is a part of our transitional typefaces, and the finale is the end of the letter form itself, and that being, as it kind of exits, and it's kind of a spot where you have to be a bit more precise. You can see where I've kind of ended it here before the actual stressed area, maybe even up a little bit more. You want to make sure that you're not getting in some of the other elements, and in Baskerville we know that the stress becomes very, not very, but much more vertical versus the stress of Garamond, which is much more vertical. So we want to be careful not to grab the stressed areas too much, but it's the end of the letter form. Again, it can be in a variety of letter forms, such as a C, and if I chose a C in one of maybe our if we choose Dido, because Dido is one of our modern classification typefaces that we keep discussing, even though the finale would be relatively small in this, it is still a part of this letter form as well. And in that case, it's just a little thinner, but again, still a part of the anatomy of that within that classification as well. The leg is pretty simple. The leg you will be able to find on a K, and a couple of other kind of shooting outs of the Y. We technically have a leg as well. So it's the smaller part of the typeface that kind of shoots off from the actual letter aspects or anatomy pieces of the other kind. So in that instance, you really do have to evaluate what it is, because we talked about the fact that in the kind of longer, we're dealing with a different part of the anatomy, so we don't want to classify that, but these are considered the legs. These particular areas here are the legs, and not to include the seraph, but those parts of the anatomy of those particular letter forms. Again, a leg is not a part of every letter form, so you really do have to look and pay attention to what it is that you're looking at. And the link or the neck is a part of a G. It's the easiest letter form to see it in, although you'll probably find the link in some other letter forms as well. Enlarge this a little bit. And this is in Dido, again transitional, but if we select back to our Baskerville, which is, I'm sorry, Dido is modern, the Baskerville is transitional, you'll notice that both of them have the neck, and the neck is, again, where a connection is made, so you do have to be very careful in your selection of the anatomy piece, but essentially it's this piece here inside. I'll go ahead and draw it on this one so you can see it a little bit more, and it's just where the connection is kind of made from the top part to the bottom part, so you have to really think about what that space is, and how that kind of translates to the information of the overall letter form, where those connections are being made. So the link or the neck is that piece that kind of connects the bowl to the loop. And coming to the loop, we'll go ahead and utilize the same G again. I'll go ahead and use the Baskerville G. And the Baskerville G, although I can use any of the other G's, and again, talking about the serif typefaces. In this particular case, the issue is that it's kind of open, but we still consider that a loop. So we still want to think about that bottom part of the G still being the loop. And when we're dealing with that loop, what we want to do is we want to be able to recognize that the typeface is, has particular intricate details to it. And in doing that, we want to really pay attention. So you have to realize that the loop is kind of where the connection of the neck is. So where I'm going to start is up here. But you also have to realize that the loop is not actually that counter space inside there. It's actually just the letter form itself. So I'm going to try to grab it as best I can here to show you the given space. So you have to be careful not to consider this space inside here a part of the loop. So if you're identifying it, you have to make sure that you're very specific on where that area is and not to include the other aspects of the letter form itself. Again, G is a good one to include the loop. And then we have serif. We have serif, and serif is actually, an easy one for everyone to kind of identify. If I do any type of a word, I'm going to go ahead, and I'm still working in Baskerville, but I'll go ahead and change it to Old Style. And this time we'll go ahead and use Jensen to identify that Old Style. And in doing that, I'm looking for the Adobe version of Jensen. We're going to go ahead and stick with times. How's that? And what you need to do with your serifs is you need to be able to identify them where they kind of stop and start. So I'm going to zoom in really big here to show you what we actually consider the serif. A lot of people include additional parts of the serif, which is not what we want to identify. We want to get down to the actual pieces of the serif. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure we come straight down from the stem and we go across. In this case, this particular typeface is very squared off in their serif, so it's a little easier to make. But I'll go ahead and fill that. So that is a serif, but you'll notice that this particular typeface has a lot of serif pieces to it, so makes it a little easier to recognize. Again, I'll zoom in just a little bit more to help identify what it is that we're looking for. I keep grabbing the typeface, not what I want to do. Just want to use the pen tool. And don't just look to the bottom of the typeface to realize that there's a serif. So for instance, this particular typeface has a serif right here, but how you identify it is the important part of it. So we're going to go ahead and fill that so you can kind of see that piece. Again, you have to be careful about how much you grab. Again, up here would be a part. We want to be careful again where we grab and how we grab it, because we don't want to grab too much. We're going to go straight down. And we want to close it off, so you have to be careful. And again, you can see a serif here, and this particular has typeface, and Word has many serifs. And then finally the shoulder, and the shoulder is in some particular letter forms. It's not in every letter form, but actually the word shoulder has some in there, such as the H and the D. We'll go ahead and use a lowercase h so you can kind of recognize that. And it will be in any of our typefaces. The H will have that, and N will have that. So we haven't used a serif in a while, so I'll go ahead and use our Helvetica and identify the actual shoulder of this particular typeface. And the shoulder is where it kind of meets from the stem around and then back up. Sometimes people say it's the hump. Not sure that's the correct way to identify, but definitely is the shoulder where it makes the connections with the other anatomy pieces and kind of identifies where the links are between the two straights, the leg and the stem itself. So here's a number of anatomy pieces for you to identify and to recognize in the various letter forms that go across the different classifications.